What is up, guys? Well, we are less than 24 hours away from Halloween 2024, and I figured this would be a great time to dive back into some of your hot takes. If you guys missed it a couple months ago, I did 2 videos back-to-back discussing a lot of your horror hot takes. There were some wild opinions thrown around, some of which I actually agreed with. And the videos did very well, so you guys seem to really enjoy it, and so I thought it'd be really cool to dive more into specific franchises, maybe some characters later on down the line. But since it's spooky season, of course, we got to talk about the Halloween franchise. So I asked you guys on YouTube, I asked you guys on Twitter to give me your spiciest Halloween hot takes. For those that don't recognize the term, unpopular opinions that would typically rile up a lot of people that heard them. And holy shit, did I get a lot of responses. Like, I got a lot on YouTube, but Twitter, that thing apparently just went viral. I think I got more quote tweets and retweets and responses than I've ever gotten for any of my tweets. Certainly one of the top ones. Every day logging back into that app going, oh my God, I have so many to read.
Bigger fingers.
God damn!
Yeah.
Fuck!
Tony, that fire.
Fuck!
That fire you got.
And so I appreciate your guys' enthusiasm. A lot of them I don't think completely qualified as hot takes, so I think in the future I'm going to have to explain more of what that is. I had a lot of people just giving me their Halloween opinions, like Halloween 1978 is a great movie, and I'm like, I don't think that's a hot take. I think that that's a very cold take. But nonetheless, I went through, I picked out the ones that I thought were the most interesting, and so I have about 20 from YouTube and about the same from Twitter, and we're going to go over all of them right now. If you guys are interested in this topic, let me know down below what other franchises or topics you want to see me dive into your hot takes on. And also, if you're a Halloween fan specifically, just yesterday I dropped the 2nd episode of Movie Brawl, and I had Dave McCray on the channel, and we discussed Halloween H2O versus Halloween 2018. It was a lot of fun. It's a great episode that I'm very proud of, so please check that out. I'll link that up here if you're a Halloween fan. Please support that show so that I know that you guys actually want more episodes. But now diving into your hot takes. We're going to start off with YouTube. And I got a comment from Chris Shamblin that says, Dr. Loomis should have been the franchise's main character, not Laurie. Loomis and Myers are opposing forces, forever hunting and battling each other through the carnage should have been the main focus. And I actually like this idea. However, I would argue that the Thorn trilogy pretty much did that. You know, that was a trilogy that really did focus on Loomis over Laurie. And even to the point where whenever I did my ranking the Halloween timelines, I even called the 1, 2, and 4 timeline the Loomis timeline. So I do think we got a version of that. But what I will agree with is that going forward, I definitely think that Laurie's a played out character. And we're going to get more into that. There was a lot of people that thought that. And I think if we are going to latch ourselves onto a character for whatever version of rebooted Halloween that we inevitably get, because you know we're not done by a stretch, I would prefer that they focus on the Dr. Loomis character over giving us yet another version of Laurie. So I agree. I think that the relationship and the dichotomy between Dr. Loomis and Myers is infinitely more interesting than what we have gotten with Laurie. We have done Laurie to death, and every version that they've gone for, with the exception of Halloween 1, 2, and H2O, which is my preferred timeline, I think has exhausted all the potential, all the possibilities with that relationship. I think there's still a lot of meat on the bones with Dr. Loomis and with Halloween. It's actually the biggest missed opportunity, I think, with the Rob Zombie films, that I wish we got more of a focus on those two, and less on Laurie. But nonetheless, I agree. If that is in fact a hot take, and you guys let me know down below that Dr. Loomis should have been the franchise's focus instead of Laurie, I actually agree with that more than I disagree with that. Moving on from that, we have Jace Dean Love that says Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is one of the top 3 Halloween films. Look, a lot of you guys know, and a lot of you guys hate the fact that you know, that I am a fan of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. It's not quite a top 3 Halloween film for me. It's a top 5 Halloween film. So I don't like it quite as much as Jace here. But I do think that Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is one of the better installments in this franchise. I've talked about it ad nauseum. I'm not going to get into a lot of it here. You can go watch my initial review of that movie. You can watch this video up here where I actually talk about my hottest horror takes, and that is certainly one that made the top 10. And I just think there's a lot of reasons why that movie is a bit misunderstood, a bit undervalued, and I understand why it rubs people the wrong way. And if we got that version of a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I might actually be on the camp that hates how bold that movie is and how different it is. But there's so much about it that I appreciate as a breath of fresh air, despite it certainly having its issues. Like I said, it's not top 3 for me, but it's certainly in top 5. So another hot take, Jace, that I'm going to be in agreement more than I'm in disagreement with. We got Zoe Crawford here that says Halloween Kills is the most rewatchable film in the franchise. Pure 80s schlock with the best kill sequences. Look, Halloween Kills has its strengths, one of which you listed here, the kill sequences. If you're going to call your film Halloween Kills, you better deliver on the fucking kills. And I think that they do. If you want just carnage candy, if that is all you come to your Michael Myers extravaganzas for, Halloween Kills is certainly a top pick. I think that along with Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, are easily the 2 goriest films in this franchise. So I agree. It's among, if not maybe, the best kill sequences. But everything else, you say 80s schlock. I just think it's general schlock. I don't think that it's nostalgic schlock. I don't think that they're even trying to go back to like the 80s vibe. I think it's just bad writing. And so it's not the most rewatchable film in the franchise by a stretch for me. In fact, of the David Gordon Green films, that is easily my least favorite of the 3. All of the Evil Dies Tonight shit. I mean, if Laurie was insufferable in moments in Halloween 2018 with the way that she is written, I think that she's insufferable throughout most of Halloween Kills for the way that she is written, even the way that some of the other characters are written. Like, I love Will Patton's character in 2018. I love the fact that he actually survived and came back in Kills, because I was so upset that he got seemingly killed by Sartain in 2018. But even his lines going back and forth with Laurie are awful. No. So, yeah, I'm glad you enjoy it, man. You're not alone. There's a lot of Kills fans out there, but it is far from the most rewatchable film for me. Brandon Sparks 9694 says the Halloween franchise doesn't need Laurie Strode anymore to continue. And I don't know. I was debating on whether to put that or not, because I don't know if that's a hot take or not. People love their Laurie Strode, and I'm sure there are some Halloween fans out there that would prefer every single Halloween film from now through the end of time has Laurie Strode locked into an eternal battle with Michael. But I agree with you. I think that we desperately need to get away from Laurie Strode. In fact, you can go all the way back to 2017, I think is when it was, when they first announced that Jamie Lee Curtis was coming back for this newly proposed Halloween film that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride were formulating. And I was one of the only people on the internet that said, I'm not excited about this. Like, I was excited at Michael doing something different and going to new territory, and now you have just handcuffed him to the same story that we've seen time and time and time and time again. And that trilogy didn't work out so well overall for me and for a lot of us. So I absolutely agree. I never want to see Jamie Lee Curtis come back to this character. And that's no knock on her. I think that she's awesome. I think she did everything she could for the multiple iterations we got of that character. But I think that she's done all she can do. I don't want to see 10 years from now them try again with a different version of Laurie Strode surviving trauma. I certainly don't want to even see a recasted version of Halloween. I like what Scout Taylor Compton did with that character for the most part in those 2 films. It was different enough, and it was exploring the character in a different way. And again, between those 2 iterations, we've done all we can do with this character. So I know you guys love Laurie Strode out there, but if I hear in a year, 2 years, 3 years that Halloween's coming back and, you know, we're going to recast or do a different version of Laurie Strode, I'm going to completely check out. I'll still be there day one because I'm a fucking whore like the rest of you, but I will not be excited. Johnny Thunder 123. Laurie Strode was a weak final girl until H2O. Yes, she survived Michael in 78, but she spent most of the third act whining, and it was ultimately Loomis who saved her. Then in Halloween 2, she was stuck in the hospital, only to be saved once again by Loomis. I don't understand how people see her as a badass in those first 2 flicks. Alice and Ginny from Friday the 13th 1 and 2 are far superior examples of badass final girls of the era. Wow. That's a hot take. So kind of following with what we were just talking about with Laurie Strode. Laurie Strode was a weak final girl until H2O. I agree. I'm sorry. H2O was the first time that she actually turned into a badass. I do think that there is a lot of fairness in that statement. I'm not saying that I disliked her character in the first two films, because I didn't. I think that she's a great character. I don't necessarily think that she's the goddess of all final girls, and I think there might even be some more takes that go along that line later on, so I won't dive into that too much now. But I do like her character, and I like what Jamie Lee Curtis brings. But what Johnny is saying here about her just being the survivor of the first film certainly is saved by Loomis. You know, she doesn't necessarily rise to the occasion of defeating Michael, and even more so in the second film because she's in a hospital bed for the majority of the film. I think it's absolutely fair to say that she was a weak final girl, not necessarily a weak character, but a weak final girl until H2O. I agree with that. But I got to push back a little bit on that last statement about Alice and Ginny are far superior examples of badass final girls. I'll give you Ginny. Okay, Ginny is one of the best final girls. Many say the best final girl in the Friday the 13th franchise. She outsmarted Jason. She seemingly defeated him, but he doesn't necessarily really ever get defeated in those original films because there's always the jump scare that he's coming back at the end. But nonetheless, Ginny is solid as fuck. Alice is one of the worst final girls in final girl history. That's no hate to the actress. It's not her fault. It's not like her performance is the reason. But my God, you want to talk about a character that is a final girl just because she happens to be the last bitch alive? That is Alice. So I agree with a lot of what you said, but you took it too far there at the end. You had me, and then you lost me just a little bit. But nonetheless, I do agree. I think that H2O, I think this version of Lori was when she became the badass. So you got me that far. Nick M. 2699, Halloween 78, Halloween 2 from 1981, and H2O is a perfect trilogy. Now, this is another one where I agree to a point. That is my favorite timeline, if you will, of this franchise. If you guys like discussing the timelines, I'm plugging a lot of videos on this. There's a video that I did a couple years ago when ended, where I talked about all the different Halloween timelines, and I created a lot of them that most people don't even talk about. So please check that out. But spoiler alert, my number one was the H2O timeline. So I do agree to the point that it is my favorite. However, calling it a perfect trilogy in any sense of the word perfect, I can't go there. I'm sorry. I know a lot of people consider Halloween 78 to be the perfect movie if there ever was one. I wouldn't completely agree with that. So I certainly wouldn't agree that Halloween 2 or H2O is a perfect film because they're both vastly inferior to the original. But even just talking about how they come together as a trilogy, you got a big issue between Halloween 2 and H2O. First of all, where the fuck has he been for 20 years? Why isn't he burned? Why does he have eyes? And if they just simply did not show his fucking eyes in H2O, the one thing that I cannot defend about that movie that I always love and try to defend is the masks and the way that they light Michael to always show his eyes. It's the only movie in the franchise that does this, and it is infamous for a reason. If they had just not shown his fucking eyes so much in that movie, we could at least suspend some disbelief with the supernatural nature of the character that he's still roaming the earth with or without eyeballs. And maybe he's, burned under the mask and we just can't see his skin. You can go that far, and I think it's plausible enough. But they didn't decide to do that. They decided to show his eyes and show a lot of his more human attributes, and so you have a big continuity error between Halloween 2 and H2O. Now, I can watch H2O and forgive it immediately. It does not become a detriment to my experience whatsoever, but you got to acknowledge it. So I think that alone creates a big issue with calling it a perfect trilogy. And there's other issues too. I mean, there's the fact that the siblings, and I've never liked that angle, and it's obvious. It's fact at this point. We can debate it all day long, but it is fact from John Carpenter. That was never the intention of the character. That was never the intention with the first movie. It only existed because he wanted to create a movie very quickly for a paycheck. And that's what Halloween 2 became. And I love Halloween 2. A lot of us do. It's got its issues, but I love that movie. But the sibling angle is another thing that would keep me from saying it's a perfect trilogy, because it doesn't jive with the first film at all. It's literally a square peg, round hole situation that we just accept because we love these characters. So, yeah, I agree that it's the best timeline. That is my chosen timeline. I would not call it perfect, though. Dominic Dunton, Halloween 4 is the best Halloween movie of the franchise. Not just best sequel, best Halloween movie. And it has one of my favorite Halloween masks. Look, the temperature of that take was already in the red with that first statement. That second statement puts it at DEFCON holy fuck level of hot take. Look, Halloween 4 is a good movie. I have certainly come around to it. I didn't used to like it, and the more that I watch it, the more that I enjoy it. It is absolutely a top 5 Halloween film for me now. So I can respect saying that that's your favorite one. I don't think that it's the best for a number of reasons, but I can respect that that is your favorite. However, saying it has one of your favorite Halloween masks, dude, I would love to hear an explanation as to why, because the Halloween 4 mask to me is easily one of the worst masks that we have ever gotten in this franchise. I think that that is the biggest stain on that movie, so I'll take it even a step further. If you just swap out that mask for the 78 mask or even the 1981 look, which is the same mask but just looked a little different, or shit, you can give me even one of the other masks that aren't as iconic as the original. Give me the fucking Resurrection mask. You know, if you give me another mask that is better than what we got in Halloween 4, that movie instantly goes up about at least half a star. It sounds ridiculous, but how Michael looks is integral to these movies. So while some people are saying that's ridiculous, it's the same movie, what does the mask matter? It fucking matters. It matters a lot. So, yeah, Dominic, I can't go on that road with you, buddy. I respect the fact that it's your favorite. That's a wild take. I would love to hear more explanation, but That Oompa Loompa says this might not be an unpopular opinion. Well, we'll see in the comment section. But the franchise would have been so much better if it stayed on the anthology idea. So for those that don't know, and I don't know how many people watching this video would not know, after Halloween 2, that was supposed to be it. That was the end of Michael Myers and Laurie and Loomis and all of that. And Halloween 3 came along, and John Carpenter wanted to create this anthology idea where every year or every 2 years, whatever their plan was, they were going to use the name Halloween and have a different Halloween-themed anthology story. And the first one was meant to be Season of the Witch. And because that movie performed so poorly, because everybody that went to see it was waiting to see Michael Myers and obviously did not get that, they scrapped that idea. So if he's saying that the franchise would have been better if they stayed with that idea. If Halloween 2 was never made and instead Season of the Witch was Halloween 2, people would have understood the idea and we could have one of the best horror franchises of all time. The ending to the original Halloween is the perfect ending for Michael Myers. Halloween 2 should have never been made, and the anthology concept is a much better concept. It's hard for me to say too definitively whether I agree or not, because I don't know what that anthology series would have looked like. I love Halloween 3, but the second, third, and fourth anthology idea might have been dog shit, so I really don't know. Operating under the assumption that they would be along the same lines of quality as Season of the Witch, I agree. I would have preferred that over endless Michael Myers chasing a family member's stories. As much as I love the character, as much as I enjoy those sequels that we got, most of them, I think there was more potential in the anthology idea. I think there's still potential. I think that would have been cool if they would go back to that idea and do that nowadays. But I do agree that would be more interesting to me personally. But I disagree that if Season of the Witch was Halloween 2 instead of Halloween 3, things would have turned out differently. If you call it Halloween 2, people are still going to walk up and say, where's Michael Myers? Where's Loomis? Where's Jamie Lee Curtis? Like, what is this? So I just think in general, using the Halloween name was the biggest issue. If that movie just came out called Season of the Witch, it would have bane a cult classic, and it would have never gotten the decades of hate that it got, that is starting to wash away now. So I'm along the same line of thinking as you. I'm eternally curious what that anthology series would have turned out to be, and I think that the potential is there that I would have enjoyed it more than what we got. But that's an alternate reality that we'll never peer into, so is what it is. Juiced Up Caterpillar says, Tyler Mane is the best Michael Myers, and both of his Michael Myers masks are the coolest looking in the franchise. I respect that. I think that the Michael Myers masks from the Rob Zombie movies are certainly among the best. They were the best that mask had looked at that point since the original 2 films. I think they've since been bested by the David Gordon Green masks, but it's one of the few things that trilogy absolutely nailed. Tyler Mane is the best Michael Myers. Another thing that I can respect. He's one of my, I think he's top 3 or 4 for me. I think that he's perfect for what those movies required him to be, which is a giant hulking beast of Michael Myers. I don't quite think that take on the character is anywhere near my favorite, because I prefer the more human, the more grounded version of the character, and just let his presence, let his visual, let the supernatural edge be what's scary, not the fact that he's like 6'5" and could break you in half. So with that said, I do prefer the Nick Castle, the James Jude Courtney, even the George P. Wilbur version of the character more than the Tyler Mane character. But I dig what Tyler Mane was doing. I think that he was perfect for those movies. So I respect that. That's a hot take for a lot of people, just because there's a lot of people that just loathe everything about the Rob Zombie films. But I think it's fair to say that he was a great Myers and the masks were great, regardless of what you think of the movies. Space Lion, the dream sequence to start Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is one of the best stretches in the entire series. Fucking preach. I am so over hearing people bitch about that hospital sequence. It's a dream sequence. It goes on too long. It's pointless. Who gives a fuck? It was a really cool way to pay homage and pull the rug out from underneath the audience that expected it to go down the road of the original Halloween 2. And it was utilized in a way that just really visualizes the trauma that they're going to be exploring with the character of Laurie Strode. I love that sequence. I think it's one of the most badass and most violent and visceral stretches of the entire series. As you just said there, I think that it's gnarly as fuck. I think that there's a lot of signs that it's a dream because of the way that all the bodies are displayed. It's so very subtly fantastical in the way that it's executed, but it's brutal. And I love the way that Tyler Mane is shot in the rain, and the way that he uses the axe when he busts through that little hut at the end. That opening stretch of that movie, I think, is probably the best part of the entire movie. And some people would say that as a negative to the movie. I say it as a positive to the movie, but I love that entire sequence. And so, yeah, I never understand the criticism hailed at that people just don't like the movie, so every little thing has to suck about it. No, it's not how it works. I'm sorry. I'm with you. I hate dream sequences because there are some dream sequences because it makes what you just saw inconsequential. But I don't think that's the case here, because it's still consequential to the character of Laurie Strode. It still serves a purpose in her character building and the story of the film. It's not just a wasted stretch. So I'm totally with you. And unfortunately, that is a hot take because more people hate that sequence than people that like it. But I'm on your side. Next, we have Andrew Good. The best part of the franchise is that every entry feels like a choose-your-own-adventure book by choosing what films to build off and which to ignore. It keeps the franchise fresh. Okay. I will say this. I enjoy the choose-your-own-adventure turnout that the Halloween franchise has become, simply because it makes it much easier to revisit. You can choose which version of Halloween to revisit. If I want to revisit the H2O timeline, I can do that without having to watch the Thorn trilogy. If I want to watch the Thorn trilogy, I can stop at 6. If I want to watch the Rob Zombie films, I can watch those 2. If I want to watch the David Gordon Green movies, I can watch those 4 films in that timeline. So I think it's interesting for rewatch value and rewatch value alone. However, I would completely disagree with your statement about it keeps the franchise fresh. I think that it just shows the incompetence of the people that have made this franchise over and over, because inevitably every single one of them have hit a stride of a great movie or a great couple movies, and then they shit the bed so epically that we have to reboot and ignore chunks of this franchise. They did it with the Thorn trilogy, with, I would say, 5 and 6, but especially 6. You have the H2O timeline, which then goes into Resurrection, which shits the bed. You have the David Gordon Green trilogy, which a lot of people say ends is that movie, and I appreciate ends for certain reasons, but a lot of people said ends is just destroys everything, so fuck this whole timeline now. I think that's the legacy, unfortunately, of the Choose Your Own Adventure, is that we keep fucking things up so badly at the finish line that we now have to reboot and ignore entire chunks of this franchise to have any sort of stability in our story. So I like the appeal of it for rewatch. It's a lot more stress-free for me as somebody that has to watch a lot of films, but I don't think it keeps the franchise fresh. I think it's actually a stain on the franchise, if anything. Sagittarius says, if the first Halloween never got any sequels, it would be entirely forgotten by now. Huh. I mean, I don't think we live in a world where that would ever happen. As influential and as much of a success as Halloween was, I don't think there was ever a possibility of that thing not getting sequels. I don't care if John Carpenter was involved or not. But anyway, for argument's sake, if we only got the first Halloween, is it a movie that we would still be talking about today? Yes, I can't agree with you. Yes, we would absolutely still be talking about it today because that's true of all of like what you would call classic horror films or classic films in general, even ones that don't have sequels. I mean, you look back at something like, I don't know, Gone with the Wind or whatever. Like, I don't think there was ever sequels to that. That was never a franchise film, but we still talk about it. You go more into the horror side of things. I mean, it's not on the level of Halloween, obviously, but you got movies like The Burning that never got a sequel. We still talk about The Burning. So, yeah, I don't think that, I mean, having sequels certainly made it more popular. It made it more of a pop culture thing. It made it, arguably the most popular slasher franchise of all time. But if there was no sequels, we would still be talking about the first movie. So definitely a hot take, but one that I don't agree with. We have Scrolls of Dragons that says, the first movie is the most boring movie. Oh, boy. The first movie is the most boring movie of the entire Halloween franchise. The remake is so much better. Well, Scrolls of Dragons, I highly suggest that you dye your hair and move out of state, because if I got the treatment that I got for just saying that Halloween 2018 was good and not great, God help you for saying that publicly. There's a version of this that I could understand if you're somebody that just really likes modern slasher aesthetics, you like modern gore, you like modern pacing. The original film is more of a psychological movie. It's a little bit more slow burn. The gore is definitely toned down. I would almost say it's non-existent for the most part. It's not really much of a bloody film at all. And so with the existence of the sequels and the Rob Zombie remake films, it looks incredibly tame by those standards. So I get it. I don't agree. I don't think it's a boring movie, but and I certainly don't think the remake is better. But I can understand that perspective if that's the reason why. If you're somebody that is just really there for the carnage candy, Halloween, the original, is not going to be a film that's very high on your ranking when it comes to kills and everything. So I get it. That's your opinion. That does not reflect mine, but I get that one at least somewhat. And Godspeed with your safety, sir or ma'am. Chelsea Barrientos, most horror films that are considered classics like Halloween, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw, etc., are considered overrated by new viewers, and this totally makes sense. Those classics were revolutionary in their time because no one had ever done it like them. Modern horror movies take a lot of influence from the classics to the point that the classics now seem cliche, but this just proves how influential they are. I only included this as a hot take because people really don't like to acknowledge that. And I agree with everything that you just said. Now, I love Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween, and I wouldn't say I love Texas Chainsaw, but I certainly respect the shit out of it. But nonetheless, I love a lot of these classic movies that I grew up with. But there's been plenty of classic horror films that I did not experience until adulthood, some of which land for me, but some of which doesn't really capture the magic for me because I'm watching it decades later after I've seen all the movies that they've influenced. And the main thing about this that frustrates me is that we shouldn't get mad about that. Not all of us were born in the 70s and the 80s and the 60s. So not all of us are going to be there when Halloween 1978 haunts people's dreams when they walk out of the theater. Not all of us are going to be there when Nightmare on Elm Street and, Friday the 13th show up on the scene. Not all of us are going to be there when Scream, rejuvenated the entire slasher genre, subgenre rather. Not all of us are going to be there for those moments. And so while some of us will still be able to watch classic films, even outside of the horror genre, and understand their appeal, still have the magic of those movies work on us, sometimes it doesn't turn out that way. That's why you see some people who prefer remakes to the original sometimes, because the remake was presented in a format that was more along the lines of the movies that they grew up with, or it was the movie that they saw first, and so it had the impact on them that the original had on you 40 years prior. And I don't think that there is anything wrong with that, and I don't think that there's anything about that that shouldn't be celebrated, because inevitably, you're still going to get those people that watch and recognize and become fans of those original movies and those original classics. They just don't hit the same. It's the reason why, somebody might watch Halloween, like the person just before this said, and they think, hey, the Rob Zombie one was better for me. Maybe they watched that one first. Maybe they just like Rob Zombie's style better. Maybe they like the modern aesthetic of that movie and the modern gore level of that. So when they go back, they can appreciate Halloween, but it just doesn't quite hit them the same way. And some people hear that and they get offended. They get really pissed off that this person that they don't know usually didn't have the same experience with this franchise, or this timeline of movies that they had. And you just can't expect people to have that. Now, sometimes people can say some really crazy shit and you can go, whoa, I need you to explain that. You know what I mean? Like if somebody said, hey, I saw A Good Day to Die Hard. I thought it was incredible. Then I watched the original and it just didn't quite hit for me. I'd be like, whoa, okay. We're going to have a conversation right fucking now. So cancel your plans. But I would still be curious to hear that conversation, because everybody pretty much agrees the first Die Hard's incredible. So sometimes that conversation gets a little stale and a little boring. I like a little chaos sometimes. So for me, we'll throw out one, even though there's many of these occurrences with me that I get in trouble for, like Dawn of the Dead. I love the Zack Snyder film the most of the Dead films. That one is the one that I saw first. That one is the one that kind of appeals more to the type of zombie film that I enjoy, which is the more visceral, kind of action-leaning, fast zombies, modern gore, things like that. And so when I went back and finally got a chance to watch the original Dawn of the Dead, I enjoyed it very much, respect the hell out of it. I get it, but it doesn't hit me the same way that the Zack Snyder film did when I first saw it. And that's okay. That's okay, because I still went back and watched those original films. It gave me the motivation to go check them out. And now I have an appreciation for those that maybe I would have went, probably not given my career path, but take the YouTube side out of it. Maybe I would have went my whole life and never gave those movies a shot. That movie gave me the motivation to do so, and now I liked all of them. So, yeah, I don't want to go on that too long, but that shouldn't be a hot take, but it is for a lot of people. Troy Grubb Jr., the Blumhouse timeline, Halloween 78, 2018, Kills and Ends, is the best timeline in the franchise and are the most rewatchable movies of the franchise. They said rewatch, but I'm assuming they meant rewatchable. I think any timeline pick for your favorite, for the most part, is going to be a hot take for some people, but given that Halloween Ends is the most recent giant disappointment for a lot of fans that we can look back on, I think this is going to be a hot take for a lot of people. I don't agree. I don't remember where in my ranking I had the David Gordon Green trilogy, that timeline, but it certainly wasn't in my top 3, maybe even my top 4. There's a lot of problems with it. You have the original film, of course, is a classic. I like 2018. A lot of people think I hate that movie. I like 2018. I just have major issues with it. I don't think it was the best version of itself. Halloween Kills, as I've said earlier in this video, I have major issues with. And Halloween Ends is a movie that I respect a lot of what it's going for. I just think it was absolutely stupid, moronic even, to try to do that in the 3rd chapter of a trilogy. That has standalone movie written all over it. And so trying to shove that into the always intended and always planned conclusion of this trilogy, I'll never believe them. I will never believe them that this was intended to be the ending. This is something that they sat around during COVID and thought too much and second-guessed themselves. But nonetheless, that timeline I have major issues with. So, yeah, I respect your opinion. I respect everybody's opinion that has, different takes of which timelines they prefer. That's kind of the one benefit of having all these different timelines. We all have our own preferred little adventure by Michael Myers, but it's certainly not my favorite. It's certainly not the best, and I would not say that they're the most rewatchable either, but oh well. Stony Baloney. I thought it said stingy for a second. Stony Baloney. Oh, man, I might get strung up for this, but okay. All right. Let's see what he's got for us. I love Michael like the rest, but compared to Freddy, Jason, Leatherface, Ghostface, etc., I find him to be more on the lackluster side of slashers. Oh boy. You and who else? Who was it? You and Scrolls of Dragons need to bunker down somewhere together because they're coming for you. Okay, so what I can say is, obviously, a lot of you guys that know me well, Michael is not my favorite of the horror icons. He's not even in my top 3. I can't say that he's lackluster compared to everybody that you just listed, and the fact that you put etc. means that this list would have gone on. I do think that Freddy's more interesting. I do think that on his better days, Jason is more interesting, but he has a lot of off days too. Leatherface and Ghostface, I would not agree with. Ghostface, the big issue there is that Ghostface is an idea more so than a character. It's a costume more than a character. We have, at this point, 12 different Ghostfaces, which is cool. That's the unique part of that franchise, but that also keeps Ghostface out of the horror icon conversation, technically. You know, we always include him anyway, but Ghostface is not a person. Leatherface, badass on his best days, but way more bad days than good days. So let's unpack it a little bit. Him to be on the more lackluster side of slashers. I'm assuming you're saying that because he's more on the subtle side. You know, he doesn't have the jump off of the screen quality of something like Freddy or Art the Clown for a more modern one, you know, Chucky, like somebody that has personality that just has all these qualities that you can look at. Michael Myers is just quiet, silent stalker with, albeit the most iconic Halloween mask of all time, one of the more plain masks of all time, which is kind of the brilliance of it. So I understand that argument to a degree. The fact that he's so excellent in his simplicity that the simplicity takes away from it for some people. I can understand that. I can respect that. For me, I think that a lot of what makes Michael awesome is that simplicity, is the fact that he's just a guy with this blank face and no eyes when they know how to light the character, H2O. And the fact that he's, you know, mostly human but has a supernatural edge, and they certainly play with that balance a lot throughout these movies. So yeah, I don't quite agree with you. He's not my favorite, obviously, so I would agree to an extent, but I certainly think that he's more interesting than the majority of horror icons out there. Just not my top 3. Now we have Frightful Fables, which is the last one that I have down here for YouTube, and then we'll move into the Twitter ones. Everybody talks about how many timelines there are in the franchise and how complicated things are, but I can watch 1 through Resurrection and accept that they're all part of a cohesive storyline, excluding 3. If we can use our imaginations to explain away Friday the 13th's time jumps, we can suspend our disbelief for Halloween 2. I enjoy the fact that you can watch them and you can tie everything together and figure out the continuity errors and give answers for that in your head to make it an acceptable timeline. But no, not for me. Now, don't get me wrong. If I'm watching them, it's not like I get hung up on it. Like, what the fuck? This makes no sense. But there's a reason why we consider them timelines and not just this incredibly messy, convoluted timeline like we do the Friday the 13th. And using that as a comparison, I mean, can we use our imagination to explain away Friday the 13th's time jumps? I don't think we can. I just think that people that love Friday the 13th don't give a fuck. So there's whatever. I'm here for the kills and the tits. So I don't. What day? Sure, whatever. Cool. I'm fine with that. But you look at, 1, 2, and then you get into the Thorn trilogy, and you have the Man in Black, and you have the Cult of Thorn, and whatever version of 6 you watch, and the implications of certain things there with the baby, and it's I don't know. Then you have that, and then you're supposed to go to H2O and accept the fact that that all happened at one point, but now there's no Man in Black motivating Michael, and the green ooze or whatever the hell was going on with that in 6 is not there. And Jamie, I guess, was a daughter that Lori had that she just said, fuck that kid. I'm going to go and raise this son that I'm overprotective on. The fact that she would be so overbearing and overprotective of him, but give no fucks about Jamie and just let her have whatever fate she has. Just that alone is too much for me. But then you get into, resurrection and everything like that too, to take it even further. No. Can't ride with you there, frightful fables. That's like a fucking the way I just read that is like a Halloween version of Lunchables. Frightfulables. Anyway, I can appreciate the fact that you can watch them with no issues, but no, there's so many issues with just sections of those. Hence why we have multiple timelines. Now moving on to Twitter, where we have about just as many. Mike Harlow. Halloween 6 is my favorite sequel. Yes, I'm serious. You, sir, are the problem. You're the reason why we can't have nice things. Mike's a friend. I'm just joking with him. Anyway, Halloween 6 is your favorite sequel. Look, 6 has its cool things about it. I think it's got great atmosphere. I think Michael's mask is awesome. I think it's got some solid kills. It's got the autumn, October Halloween vibe going for it, which is interesting. How many Halloween films don't have that as a big strength to where it actually stands out in a movie like 6? But 6 is fucked up, man. 6 has everything going on with Jamie Lloyd is weird. The baby, no matter what version, is a weird thing, and one is significantly weirder than the other. You have Paul Rudd here as Tommy. The people that defend that performance baffle me. Like, I love Paul Rudd too. The man's a national fucking treasure, but no. And then the ending, no matter what ending you get, is like, what? What does that mean? So yeah, can't rock with you on that one, man. But I appreciate the fact that you you chimed in there with the full chest. Yes, I'm serious. Wilson Cleveland. I'd like to see a Halloween multiverse TV series like Castle Rock. Intertwine every timeline and character, including Halloween 3. Historically, there were Druid settlements in Illinois. Make Haddonfield ground zero for Samhain shit, where Michael is just a product of the evil town. There's an idea there that I like. I don't know if it's going to work as cleanly as you make it out to be. I certainly wouldn't mind somebody trying. I mean, what the fuck do we have to lose? We tried everything else. A Halloween multiverse TV series. I mean, there's something there. If we could find a way to tie the Silver Shamrock lore in with Michael Myers in a way that's actually compelling, and then maybe even include some other stuff, as I was saying earlier about maybe revisiting that anthology idea, I can roll with that. That'd be something pretty interesting. But you're also kind of teetering on the level of explaining Michael a little bit too much, which is the problem that we continuously get ourselves into with this franchise. So I like Michael more when there is no explanation versus Druid settlements and Samhain and all that kind of stuff. So I'm half and half on your hot take here. Evan Hoyt Wasserstrom. I wish that Halloween 3 was a box office success, as it would have been amazing to see the horror storylines that were created each year thereafter around the holiday if it did well back in 82. And so, yeah, this is kind of revisiting something we were talking about on the YouTube side where we had somebody talk about it would have been better to see the anthology thing play out. I should have stuck this one right next to that one. But anyway, yeah, as I said to them earlier, I do have a hankering to know what that would have turned out to be, because I think that there's potential that I would have enjoyed those stories more than just the Michael versus Laurie thing over and over and over again. But I think we're in a time now, if we could figure it out, where we could have a Halloween proper franchise, which is the Michael Myers stuff, and we can also explore the Halloween anthology series, call it something else, Tales of Halloween or some shit like that, something better than that. But anyway, you know what I'm saying? I think we're in a time now where we've done enough where you could have those running concurrently. You could have one in movies and one go to streaming services or something. It's worth exploring. Chris Parker, 3C himself. I wouldn't mind a Halloween movie not on Halloween. Blasphemy, I know. Well, you said it, I didn't. But man's got to have the urge to kill aside from one day of the year. Dumb, yes, but is it dumber than Kung Fu kicking Michael Myers? You make a valid point there at the end. I don't know. That's one of the things that's always interesting about these movies, is that you assume that Michael is in this endless pursuit of these characters, but somehow he only comes around on Halloween. Like it's just such an integral piece to the movies that I think all of us just forgive it, and none of us really ask any questions. Much like we were talking about earlier with the Friday the 13th time jumps. We're like, I don't give a fuck. It's got to be Halloween. I don't give a shit why. So I get what you're going for. But I think you have much more potential to piss a lot of people off over something so simple and what should be trivial versus us just acknowledging the fact that for some reason it takes him 365 days every single time to catch back up with these fucking people. So yeah, I don't know. You guys let me know down below. Do you want to see a 4th of July Halloween film? Chime in. Let 3C know. Horror Movie Review 73. Halloween Resurrection isn't as bad as many say it is. Yes, it's bad, but I find it entertaining, and you have to admit there are slasher sequels that are far worse. I'm probably one of its few defenders. Well, I would not call myself a defender because I still think it's a shit movie, but I agree with you. I don't think Halloween Resurrection is as unbelievably unwatchable, crime to society level bad as a lot of people make it out to be. Hence the fact that it's not even my worst of the franchise. I have it one tick higher than Halloween 5. And you're going to compare it to some of the other franchises, like Freddy's Dead is worse. Jason Takes Manhattan is worse, in my opinion. We can get into some of the other ones, like Wrong Turn, maybe a few Hellraiser movies are worse than Halloween Resurrection. The reason that people have such a passionate distaste for Halloween Resurrection, despite some of the 2000s bad entertainment that it offers, is because it so strongly insults and violates two characters that are beloved in this franchise, which is Laurie and Michael. The opening with Laurie is unforgivable, especially after the ending of H2O, and the way that they connect the dots from H2O to Resurrection can go fuck itself. And so if you're finally going to get the death of Laurie, that's what we get. Nope. You lost me. You lost me in the first 5 minutes. And then you get to Michael and you get the multiple scenes where he's disrespected in this movie, and they kind of make him a joke in his own franchise, and you don't fucking do that. You don't do that. So despite the fact that I think that it's perfectly watchable, this generic but watchable, that I can have a decent enough time watching. I don't hate myself after the 90 minutes that I spend with Halloween Resurrection, but the reason why people have it so low is because of those two things mainly. They cannot get past that, and so it makes everything else absolutely irrelevant to the conversation, which I can respect. I just don't feel that way. I would rather watch this than Halloween 5 any day. So I'm with you. I wouldn't go as far to say I'm a defender of it, but I certainly don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. And right along the same lines, you have High Fred saying Halloween Resurrection is awesome, and wow. Yeah, so don't agree with that. That's certainly a hot take. Halloween Resurrection is tolerable at best. I think that's the most forgiving word that you can give. That's the highest praise that I can give with a straight face to Resurrection, is it's tolerable. Saying it's awesome, I respect the fact that you think it's awesome. You get that much enjoyment out of it. No. Blood and Bud says Halloween Ends is objectively one of the best movies of the franchise, if not the best. The only drawback is that it never should have been marketed as a normal Halloween film. If they were upfront with what to expect, then the people would see. I don't know if I cut off part of that comment or not, then the people would see. But Halloween Ends is objectively one of the best movies of the franchise. I don't know if you necessarily meant it this way, but I always take big issue whenever people use that word objectively when talking about film. There's no objectivity in film or in art in general. It's all subjectivity. You can even go to the most extreme cases of something like Freddy's Dead and try to say, like, this is objectively a garbage movie. Well, there's a lot of people that love Freddy's Dead. There's a lot of people that get a lot of joy out of that movie. So who am I to tell them that objectively they're wrong because they get something out of it that I don't? So I don't like the use of objectively, because no, Halloween Ends is not objectively one of the best movies of the franchise. It is subjectively one of your favorites, but there's no measure out there that we have all agreed on that we can measure films on and tell what is objectively good, bad, or mediocre. It just doesn't exist. Now, getting off that soapbox, the drawback is that it never should have been marketed as a normal Halloween fan. If they were upfront, people would have saw it a little bit differently. I don't think that that's necessarily true either. Maybe it would have softened the blow a bit, but the issue with Halloween Ends is not so much what they're trying to do, it's when they're trying to do it. If they had wrapped up the David Gordon Green franchise, the trilogy, and then a couple years later we have this Halloween standalone film about the after effect of all of that and how the evil has now transferred onto this character, Corey Cunningham, I think a lot of people would have dug it. But the issue is that you have a Halloween movie that is marketed heavily and promised and should be, because it's the culmination of this trilogy that has all been focused on the final confrontation between Laurie and Michael. You have a movie that is anything but that until the last 15 minutes, and then they give you the most half-ass version of that. So the people that defend Halloween Ends and say it's brilliant and it's awesome, they don't typically refute that. They just say, hey, I love the fact that it's different, and people that they just don't want different. They want the same movie over and over again, which is true to an extent. But the biggest issue with it is that they chose to do that. It's almost like a sleeper, like a fucking Trojan horse. They marketed a movie that this movie wasn't. And so when a lot of people went into this, they weren't prepared. They weren't primed for a story that was not Michael and Laurie, because that's all they were told that it was. And that's all it was set up to be for the previous two films. You can argue all day long about the evil in Haddonfield and this was intended all along. I will never believe that. I will never agree with that. I don't care how many times David Gordon Green and Jason Blum say it. Don't agree. Don't believe that that is the truth whatsoever. So I don't know where I was going with all of that. But anyway, it should have been marketed as a normal should not have been marketed as a normal Halloween film, and people would have liked it more. I think people still would have been pissed off as that being the culmination of that trilogy, even if they marketed it honestly. Marketing it dishonestly was certainly one of the issues, but I still think people would have walked out saying, why did we do this for the third chapter of a trilogy? It makes no sense. I think that's ultimately what the issue is. The marketing's a piece of it, but the overall issue that's not going to go away with no matter how you market it is that that story makes no sense for the third chapter of that trilogy. It just doesn't. Rockland Graves, my buddy Evan, Halloween Ends is one of the best of the franchise. Halloween 2, 2009 is way overhated and is a cool, weird take with some fantastic direction from Zombie. And Halloween H2O feels too much like a Scream movie to be a satisfying end to the story. Okay, so we got a 3-for-1 deal here. Halloween Ends, one of the best of the franchise. You know, again, that right there in and of itself is a take that is hot for a lot of people, but I respect it. You know, Halloween Ends, the fact that it's so different is what I liked about it for most of that movie, and then ultimately what led to my disappointment with it when they didn't commit to that by the third act. But I understand why a lot of people love it, because a lot of the Halloween movies are like the same fucking meal, just over and over and over again. So sometimes it's good to taste something a little different. Halloween 2, 2009 is way overhated, a cool, weird take with some fantastic direction from Zombie. I've already said this. I agree wholeheartedly, so I'm right there with you. I will burn with that hot take just alongside you. And Halloween H2O feels too much like a Scream movie to be a satisfying end of the story. I acknowledge that there's definitely more of a Scream influence on that movie than a Halloween influence. I don't think it's quite as overbearingly prevalent as a lot of people make it out to be. I still think it has the feel of what they're going for with Halloween. There's just a lot of Scream flavor sprinkled on top with, you know, some of the direction with the score and some other things. But a lot of people take that stance with it. They're like, this movie just doesn't fit. It doesn't feel Halloween-y. It's not quite that degree for me. So I don't completely agree with you. I think it's a very satisfying end of the story. As I've said numerous times, that's my preferred ending to this story. But nonetheless, respect. I think that's kind of a cold take. I think I'm the one with the hot take there at that last one with the H2O. AEO GTFO. There is so much more left to do with this character. I don't know if that's a hot take. I just included it because I couldn't disagree more. I think if anything, we are so out of things to do with this character. These characters, whether you're talking about Michael and or Laurie. I would not want to be in charge of rebooting this franchise, because what the fuck else is there to do? We've done everything. We've taken it in every possible weird, fucked up direction. What left is there to do? Even if you just did something like Laurie's not here. After Michael fell off of the balcony, he went on and just did his thing and never saw Laurie again. And now we're going to pick up with his killing rampage the next day in 1978 or years later, whatever. Even that in and of itself would kind of feel like, okay, that would have been cool a decade or 2 decades ago, but what else are we going to do? Now he's just aimlessly killing people. What's the story here? So I would have preferred that angle for the David Gordon Green trilogy when they first announced it, but they didn't do that. So yeah, I think I wholeheartedly believe the opposite of what you're saying. I think that we are desperately out of ideas for this character. I'm sure they're going to find one. I'm sure they're going to pitch one here in the next year or so. And maybe it'll be some fascinating thing I couldn't think of. It should be that way. I shouldn't be able to outsmart any Hollywood writers. But nonetheless, like I said, if they contacted me and said, hey, man, you got the job, write us the new Halloween movie. What direction are we going to take? I'd be like, fuck, man. How much time do I have? Oh, Vinny P. He's got two for us. Halloween 2018 is better than the original. Corey would have been a perfect replacement for Michael instead of killing him off. There's a version of that I can get behind. I still don't think the majority of the fan base, the vast majority of them, would stand for that. Again, standalone movie where he carries on, does his thing, and that's kind of the intention of the end of that story is now Corey's the new shape. There's a version of that I could have dug depending on how they executed it. That first one, though, Halloween 2018 better than the original. I mean, I don't agree that any other Halloween movies are better than the original, but Halloween 2018 certainly would not be the one that I would argue if I had to. So yeah, I mean, respect again, but maybe it's one of those situations I was talking about earlier where Vinny watched Halloween 2018 and then reintroduced to the rest of the franchise, and now Halloween 2018 had that impact for him that 78 had for a lot of us. Possibly. So yeah, I respect it, but no, sir. I will not be flying that flag with you. Sledgehammer horror. Now the party's starting. Halloween. Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure this is Ken, by the way. He's going on this little rant here. So correct me down below, Ashley, if one of these were yours, but I know that Ken gets very heated with Halloween. So here's a little mini rant from Ken Sledge. Halloween 6 is the worst movie in the franchise. Resurrection is better than half of the franchise. H2O is better than 78. The franchise has more bad than good movies. And without Halloween 3, the franchise would have been ruined and wouldn't have continued at all. Okay, let's go one at a time, shall we? Oh boy, Ken, I think you're going to win the hot take award here. Halloween 6 is the worst movie in the franchise. I don't know if that's such a hot take. Maybe a mild take, because I think there's movies that are definitely worse, but more people think Halloween 6 is on the bottom rung than the top rung, I would say. So we're starting off a little cold. Resurrection is better than half of the franchise. Yeah, that's hot as fuck. So half of the franchise, so I'm guessing 6, 5. I don't know how you feel in the Rob Zombie films. I don't think we've ever talked about that. A couple of the David Gordon Greens. Yeah, I don't know. I would want to know what half of the franchise it's better than, Ken. So if you're watching this, let me know down below in a comment. But for me, Resurrection is better than one movie of this franchise. And sometimes that's even a hot take for me to say. H2O is better than 78. Look, I love me some H2O, okay? I'm an H2O purist over here. Ken needs a nap. Ken's getting a little crazy. Ken must be working some overtime. His brain's not firing right. Has more bad than good movies. I can understand that take. I wouldn't quite go that far. There's definitely a lot of mediocre ones. But I think there's more strong movies in this franchise than bad ones. So if I was going to point out the movies that I think are just bad, even if they're watchable in the franchise, I would say obviously Halloween 5. I would say Resurrection. I would say Rob Zombie's first film. I would say Halloween Kills. And that might be where I stop, because the rest of them are all pretty good from that point up. So that's less than half. So yeah, okay, yeah. You add in a couple more there. I could meet you halfway. And then let's see, what was the last one? Without Halloween 3, the franchise would have been ruined and wouldn't have continued at all. That was one that I would want to discuss more. So I think is the stance that you're taking that Halloween 3, the controversy was so strong that Michael did not return, that ultimately led him to return in Halloween 4, because they realized people were so ravenous for that character where they would have forgotten all about him if they just never continued with the Halloween name. That actually is an argument that I think could be pretty strong, if that's in fact what I'm reading between the lines of what you're saying here. If I'm wrong, then give me more context down below. So yeah, I'll meet you halfway, Ken. A couple of these I can dig. A couple of them I think you're a little wild, but that's what we're here for, right? Reno McDallas in Rob Zombie's Halloween. He should have gone with a Captain Picard mask instead of the Captain Kirk one. I couldn't tell if that was a joke or not, but I thought it was funny. Could you imagine Michael Myers walking around with a fucking Jean-Luc Picard? Half the people would be like, hey, it's Professor X. Wouldn't even know who the hell he's supposed to be. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see a painted Captain Picard mask with the side hair teased out. I just want to see that. Somebody like AI, I don't give a fuck. Somebody make that. Progressive Lotus, I just want to see what Halloween Part 4 looks like with a good CGI mask that looks like the poster. Signed, someone who hates CGI. I would ask for the shoulder pads to be removed, but the mask is more important. You know, I would actually be curious to see that movie too. I don't know how, if we're operating under like a deep fake or something where it would actually look somewhat convincing, I would want to watch it and see how much of a difference it actually makes. Because, yeah, they have the Shatner mask, the original one, on the cover of Halloween 4 because they knew how shit that mask looks in the actual movie. Which, just by the way, how do they fuck up the mask so continuously in this franchise? Like, the most simple mask of all. The most easy, it should be, seemingly, the most easy to replicate mask of all. And they shit the bed constantly with that thing. To where, I mean, from Halloween 2... onward, you got the shining light of Halloween 6 thrown in there, and then we didn't get a good mask again until Rob Zombie. So, yeah, I don't know. But, yes, I would be curious to see that, too. I mean, I don't know. The hot take there is just the CGI, because CGI and horror just don't mix very well for the most part. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many people agree with that, but to me, I thought that was interesting. Camille Paglia Stan. Laurie and Michael being siblings raised the stakes and made the franchise less generic and gave it an interesting angle that was ultimately realized in the climactic showdown in H2O. Being strangers to one another made Halloween just another generic, boring 80s slasher with no personality. So I'm assuming that you're referring to the David Gordon Green movies and not the original Halloween, because the original Halloween, they weren't siblings. We can, try to excuse that away all we want to make H2 and onward make sense, but it's a fact. They were not siblings in that original film. She was just random person that he stalked. And so there's an element to the sibling angle that certainly gave Halloween something unique. It gave a unique motivation for their signature killer. But I think it got so played out and so ridiculous and so repetitive and redundant that it lost the luster of that uniqueness. And so I very much long for a take on this character that takes it back to the original, where he doesn't have any motivation. He's just out there doing his fucking thing. Now, you're going to have to find some kind of a story to wrap around it, because obviously Michael himself and his motivation can't be the plot anymore. But I would not say that it made it just another generic, boring slasher to try to do that. I think the approach that they took in 18 just didn't work for other reasons, because it was a lateral move at the end of the day. You still had those two characters being shoved against each other like this epic rivalry, but now there's no canonical reason for it. They had to invent the Sartain character to even make it make sense why they're in the same setting in the third act. So I think it all comes down to execution. I don't think it's the idea itself. Blaze's Ark. Halloween 2007 was brilliant and got a ton of unfair hate because remakes were really hated at the time, which is sort of contradicted by the second reason people hated it being that it was so different. So there's elements in here that I can agree with, like Halloween 2007 being brilliant, I don't agree with. That's one of my least favorites. There's elements of that movie that I like, mainly the third act. There's some characters here and there, but first act is unwatchable to me. Second act was a gigantic missed opportunity. Said that numerous times. It got a ton of unfair hate because remakes were really hated at the time. I don't know if that's necessarily true, because while us in the horror community like to think that we're the loud majority voice, we're not. And so the reason why the remake craze happened in the 2000s is because all the general movie-going audiences absolutely loved what we were doing with all those. They loved seeing the Texas Chainsaws and the Amityvilles and the Friday the 13th and everything get remade. And a lot of those movies got rated pretty well by average people that weren't super crazy horror purists like a lot of us that are like, nope, only the original. So there's a version of what you're saying that like the hardcore Halloween fans were maybe unfair to it and didn't give it a chance, but I also don't think it's a good movie. So I don't think it's the best example. I would say a better example for that argument would be like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where I genuinely think that's a really good movie, but a lot of people just did not give it a chance and they call it a piece of shit and everything just because it's not the original. And it was never trying to be the original. It was trying to do something completely different. And so then you get into that damned if you do, damned if you don't argument of like, if we just try to emulate the original, people say we're devoid of creativity. But if we try to do something different, they say this isn't like the original, fuck this movie. And you get a lot in between. So there's sprinkles of what you're saying that I agree with. The overall statement doesn't necessarily reflect how I would think. But you're on the right track. I just don't know if Halloween 2007 is the best example to have that conversation, my own personal opinion. Angelus King, Rob Zombie's Halloween is the best in the series. Yeah. I'm just going to say disagree. I'm just going to say disagree and move on. I don't know. Moose, Halloween 2 1981 is one of the worst sequels in the franchise. Lazily written. Laurie does nothing but stay in bed the whole movie. Michael is almost robotic. It disregards the atmosphere and tension from the first to basically become a generic 80s slasher like Friday the 13th. There's shades of what you're saying, especially towards the end there, that I can agree. I don't think it's one of the worst sequels. I think it's one of the better sequels, but there's still a lot of issues with Halloween 2. Halloween 2 survives mostly off of nostalgia. It best captures kind of the look and the vibe of the first film, so I don't think that it completely disregards the atmosphere you were talking about. It doesn't do as good of a job, but I think it does a decent job at kind of sticking with the look of the first movie. But then you get into what you're saying about just specifics, like lazily written. I mean, the writing as far as like characters and dialogue, it's not like it's outstanding in the first one. I know it's crazy to say that. We are talking hot takes, right? It's a classic, but there's elements of that first film that don't age well. And so you move into the second film. I don't think it's significantly worse. But Michael being robotic, yeah, I'm not as big on Dick Warlock's performance as I am some of the others. And Laurie being in bed the whole time, absolutely agree with that. She's a very inconsequential character until the last 10 minutes. But it basically becomes a generic 80s slasher like Friday the 13th. Yeah, I've said that before, that it's interesting because you have 1978 Halloween that heavily influenced Friday the 13th. I mean, they've been open and honest that they were literally trying to rip off Halloween with that first film. Then Friday the 13th, 1980 comes out, continues to push the door open for slashers and make it more of a gore fest and more focused on the kills. And so then you move into 1981 with Halloween 2. And so it creates this timeline where Halloween 78 influenced the creation of Friday the 13th, and then Friday the 13th influenced the creation of Halloween 2. So I agree with that last part. It's much more of a Friday the 13th style movie. That's why the gore is significantly higher in that second film than in the first one, and it's more focused on the kills than character moments. Max Milley, Halloween Ends could have been a much better film had Michael killed Laurie at the end of Halloween Kills. Interesting. So we have this proposed trilogy. We know when we walk into Halloween Kills that there's going to be another movie. So all of us were wondering what the cliffhanger, what the ending of this movie is going to be. What are they going to leave us on for a year until we get to Halloween Ends? What would have happened if he actually killed Laurie at the end of that movie instead of Karen? I actually like what you're going for here. I think that would have been fucking crazy in a good way. I don't know how everybody else would have responded to it. Maybe people would have burned the fucking theater down. But I dig what you're going for here. Because as much as I don't really care for Halloween Kills, if it would have ended with that, I'd have been like, holy shit. Now what? What the fuck? I wasn't expecting that. And then you have Halloween Ends, which is the story of, now Karen and Allison trying to move on. And she gets entangled with Corey Cunningham, and now I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much it would have made Halloween Ends a better movie with just that simple change there, but I kind of like what you're going for here. So, yeah, I would want to see how that would play out. Dice Roland stops by and says the Halloween franchise as a whole is very lukewarm. The OG is significant in horror, yes. It's not a masterpiece, though. Carpenter's annual anthology concept is more interesting, and the franchise should have ended years ago with, say, Halloween H2O. Oh, boy. Dice bringing out the big ones. The OG is significant, but not a masterpiece. I have said a version of that for a very long time. There's a lot of people out there that if any subject or ranking or discussion that could possibly pertain to Halloween in any stretch, if Halloween is not at the top of the hill, then you're an idiot. And so I've always maintained that while Halloween is a classic, while it is certainly in my list of favorite horror films of all time, it's a bit overrated. And that is not a contradictory statement like some people like to make it out to be. Overrated does not mean that it sucks. Overrated means whatever my perceived majority opinion of it is, my opinion is that it's a bit less than that. And so it's not the end all be all of film where all other films are shit in comparison to what John Carpenter did in 1978. I just don't think it's on that level. So I agree with what you're saying in that context. The annual anthology concept, more interesting. We've gone over that a couple of times. I pretty much agree with that too. Franchise should have ended years ago with, say, Halloween H2O. I don't know. You know, I take the opinion that my buddy Joey Sasso has said numerous times. And that's that I don't necessarily want to live in a world where a lot of these favorite franchises of ours ever just stop for good. Sometimes they need to go away, and sometimes they need to go away for a long time. But I don't ever want to be in a spot where it's like we just definitively say, okay, that's the last Halloween movie ever. We're never making another one again. Stamped, signed, delivered, take it to the bank. Because give it 10 years, less for some people, 10 minutes for some. Give it 10 years, 15 years, 20 years especially. Without a Halloween film, I guarantee you, a lot of us, even the ones that are most critical of this franchise, are like, you know, it'd be cool right about now, a new Halloween movie. That would be sexy. So, yeah, I think that Halloween needs to take a break. I think they need to go away for a while. I think that they had a nice, long, needed break between the Rob Zombie films and the David Gordon Green movies. I think it was time to come back. But they didn't execute that trilogy the best for a lot of us. And so now I think they need to go away again. You know, I don't want to see a Halloween movie get announced within the next 5 years. It's almost certainly going to be. But I could go 5 to 7 years without a new Halloween film easily. But then you have other franchises like Nightmare on Elm Street, where a lot of us are like, dude, where the fuck is the new Nightmare movie? And at least half of those movies are not very good. So, you know, you had the people that argue, and you just put it to bed. We've made enough mistakes with it. Don't ever do another one. And then there's going to be equally as strong of an argument of, well, if somebody comes along and has a great idea and it's time and there's hunger for it, why the fuck not? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't ever want to say that the Halloween franchise should have ended here or should end now, because I think there's always going to be room for somebody to do something with it, even if it's boring and generic. Sometimes we're okay with that. We just want more Halloween because it's been so long. Nate Basham, 5 is way underrated and maybe the 3rd or 4th best in the franchise. Well, 5 is my least favorite, so obviously I disagree with you. Maybe the 3rd or 4th best in the franchise. Even that I think is stretching it. I would want to know why 5 is more underrated. That's the hard part, is that I need to know the context of why. Just saying it's underrated, I need to know what is underrated about it, because I look at that film and I see nothing but weird decisions and a very terrible Michael Mask, not the best Michael performance, a weird Loomis performance too, a mute Jamie, Rachel gets killed off unceremoniously, we switch over to Tina, for fuck's sake. Not even that great of kills in that movie. You got the laundry chute scene and some decent atmosphere for Halloween vibes in it. That's about all the accolade I can give to that one. So yeah, I don't know. I would want to know more. But yeah, I can't agree with that one. Sorry. Ron Wingart, you put Halloween 6 Michael in Halloween 4's film. It's the best of the franchise. You put Halloween 4 Michael into 6. It's up there with Resurrection. Interesting. Okay. So we take the George P. Wilbur mask from Halloween 6 and put it in Halloween 4 because it's the same actor. but maybe a little bit more ferocious. So ramp up the ferocity of Michael a little bit. Put him in Halloween 4. It's the best of the franchise. But you take Halloween 4's Michael into 6, and you take away pretty much the one thing that most of us agree on, that Michael was pretty awesome in 6, and it's now completely shit. I actually agree with you. I think that there's some sound logic with that one. Just the Michael swap itself would make significant differences to both of those films. So yeah, I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but I thought it was interesting. So that one I agree. Far from Blake, the only thing that stops Halloween 4 from being clearly the best in the franchise is the mask situation. I'd argue H2O would have a good argument as well if the mask was better. And, that's the interesting thing that we get into, that you have to be a Halloween nerd to understand. Like, you have this conversation with regular people, and even some, very well-established movie pundits that aren't necessarily big into horror would tell you that you're crazy. I would imagine... I don't want to put words in his mouth because obviously he's never said anything like this. I know he doesn't like the movies, but let's say somebody like John Campea, for example. I would bet money that if you said, hey, if you just change the mask in this movie, the movie's so much better, he would tell you no. The movie's still going to be terrible because aside from the mask, everything else that's bad about it's still there. But a lot of us Halloween fans know how important that mask is. More important than it should by any, reasonable logic, but it's important. Where when you have the movies with a shit mask, that becomes that movie's legacy. That's how fucking important it is. Like, everybody that talks about H2O in a negative light, what do they bring up? Sometimes they bring up the Scream stuff like our buddy Evan did earlier from Rockland Graves, but a lot of times they bring up the masks. They're like, what the fuck? No, I'm not behind that movie whatsoever because of the mask and the eyes and the CGI mask. Like, no, get the fuck out of here. Same thing with Halloween 4. You have the people that they will agree on everything about how great it is, but they always bring up how terrible the mask is. Blah, 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 but the mask sucks. It's almost always the conversation with 4. So I wouldn't say that changing the mask would make it clearly the best in the franchise. I think it would definitely make the movie better. And certainly H2O. I think H2O is an argument that I would make. If you have H2O with the Part 6 mask that they started shooting it with, I think that movie gets significantly better, and it's already one of my favorites. So I would lean more on the H2O side of what you're saying. But yes, the mask is fucking important. It's crazy how important it is, but it is. And God bless the ones that understood it and actually took the time to make a good one. Whitney Banks, aside from the original, it pales in comparison to Friday the 13th. Okay. Time out here. Fucking time out. So I totally respect that we all have our favorites. I'm a Freddy guy and a Chucky guy. Some people think Freddy, or more often people think Chucky is ridiculous, and we're a Michael and a Jason guy. Some people are Leatherface people. Some people are Ghostface people. A lot of people nowadays are the clown people. So I get it. We all have our preferences. But aside from the original, it pales in comparison to Friday the 13th. Under what standards? Because, look, nothing but love for the Friday the 13th franchise and Jason Voorhees as a character and everything. I enjoy those movies despite their glaring flaws. But there's a reason why I say that. Those movies are pretty shit, most of them, under any respectable standard. And again, it's all subjective. But aside from the original, so Halloween 2 onward can't hold a candle to most of the Friday the 13th movies. Nah. Again, all subjective. It's all preference. I think that's wild. I think that's wild to say. You have a couple in there, like a lot of people like Friday the 13th Part 2. I love Final Chapter. 6 is a big favorite. I think the remake is great, and it's actually starting to get a little bit of love. It seems like people are softening on their hate for it. So there's definitely some standouts in the Friday the 13th franchise. But there's standouts all throughout the Halloween franchise, too. Halloween 1 and 2. You got Halloween 4 in there. You've got H2O, in my opinion. You got Halloween 2018. Halloween 3, whether you want to include it or not, is a big standout for a lot of people. So, yeah, I don't think it pales. You can have your preference for sure. That would be a conversation I would want to have. That would be a good debate. Crappy Van Winkle. Rob Zombie was the worst thing ever to happen to this franchise. Again, I would want to have more context to that because I would not agree. I understand people have their issues with those movies. A lot of those issues I share. But I don't think we would get the Halloween 2018 trilogy without Rob Zombie's film, because for a long time, Rob Zombie's remake was the highest grossing Halloween film. Whether you could say he did a good job with it or not, we could certainly argue that, but he brought some excitement back to the franchise when it was dead and gone after H2O and Resurrection. And so, much like where Ken was arguing earlier that Halloween 3 is the reason why the franchise continued on, I would say the same thing for Rob Zombie. I don't know if we would have gotten the David Gordon Green trilogy, and certainly don't know if we would have gotten the hype level to make Halloween 2018 the monstrous success that it was if those movies didn't exist, for better or worse. So I wouldn't say that he's the worst thing to ever happen in the franchise at all. I would say that elements of the Thorn trilogy are significantly worse. I would say Resurrection is significantly worse. So yeah, I wouldn't quite agree, despite a lot of my issues with what Rob Zombie did. D Galaxy, Jamie Lloyd is a much more interesting character to follow than Laurie Strode. I don't know how spicy that one is too, but I know there's some people that prefer Jamie. There's some people that prefer Rachel. I think that there's an argument to be made that Jamie Lloyd in Part 4 is certainly interesting to follow, especially with the way that that movie ends. If they had followed that up properly or just let that be the ending. But when you have Jamie Lloyd in Part 5 and especially what they do with Part 6, I don't know. That's a character that if they're going to go back to a family angle, and I hope they don't, I would want to see more with that character versus seeing more with Laurie Strode. I don't know if I would say that she's a more interesting character as is, but there's potential there. All right, we got 2 more. Just another Twitch viewer. I don't get the obsession over Laurie. The worst character of 78, the fandom won't let go of. A void of a character. My other take is Resurrection is not as good as they say. No, not as bad as they say. I was going to say that's not a hot take. Not as bad as they say. It's goofy fun that tried to do something different, and it's an easier rewatch compared to the others. Okay, well, we got 2 very big ones, one much spicier than the other. Basically saying that Laurie sucks as a character. I don't think that I agree that she's terrible. I don't think that I agree that she's the worst character of 78, certainly. But I do think she's a bit overrated. You know, I do think that just the status of being one of the first ones and Jamie Lee Curtis's star power and how many times we brought the character back, especially that she's risen to be this queen of final girls. She's not in my top 3. You know, I do think that she's overrated. I don't think that she's the best final girl at all. But she's certainly, I would say, not even arguably, definitively, she's the most popular overall. But yeah, so I'll meet you halfway. I don't think I'm quite as harsh as you are, but I'm halfway there. Resurrection not being as bad as they say. Goofy fun. They tried to do something different. I don't know if they tried to do something different, honestly. It is like, what really is different about that movie? The found footage-ish kind of angle there. Like, that's not prevalent enough in the movie. It just felt like they didn't know how to not make a Halloween film. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis talked about this in an interview where she was talking about why Halloween H2O and Resurrection turned out the way that they did. And that's because they pitched to her, hey, you want to have a final confrontation with Michael and finally end this motherfucker? And she's like, hell yes. And then eventually they told her, yeah, the Akkads will not let you kill Michael. And she's like, well, what the fuck are we doing here then? And so if I'm remembering the story correctly, it was Jamie Lee Curtis that came up with the whole like, okay, let me have this movie where I kill him and everything's good, and then contractually, obviously, I have to come back for another one. Kill me the fuck off and move on with your shitty movie and just say that it was somebody else. And so even she knew it was horse shit, but contracts are a bitch. And so that's why a lot of us were like, yeah, H2O is the ending. I don't even acknowledge Resurrection. It just didn't happen. I think that's what it is. They just didn't know how to not make another Halloween movie when H2O was so successful. So I don't think I agree that they tried to do very much different. There's not a whole lot about that movie that's different. It's just a product of them not being able to fucking say no. And then finally, we're going to end with Slasher in Suits. I love the Dr. Sartain twist. That's a very hot take for me because I fucking hated the Dr. Sartain twist. I think there was something you could have done interesting with that character. That is the most what the fuck section of that movie. When he stands up with the mask and make room for my patient and he reveals that he's kind of guiding Michael to go to Laura. It's just bullshit that they threw in there to give some sort of logic for why Michael ends up at Laurie's house when there were so many other easily more plausible reasons to have that. Just simply have him chase Allison there. Boom. Problem solved. Nonetheless, I love the Dr. Sartain twist because now it explains how Michael knows how to drive a car in 78 and escape. It's a Rogue One-like explanation I appreciate. I included this because I'm puzzled. Now, maybe I just don't remember Halloween 2018 as well as some others. Now, granted, I've only seen it once since 2018. I don't remember anything about a reveal regarding Dr. Sartain that explains why Michael knows how to drive and escape in 78, because Sartain had nothing to do with 78. So correct me if I'm wrong. I think, Slasher in Suits, I think you're interpreting things in that movie the wrong way. All that Sartain was revealing is that he studied underneath, we knew this obviously, it wasn't part of the twist, he studied underneath Loomis. He grew to have the same obsession that Loomis had and just took things in a different direction. He wanted to let Michael free and actually see evil in action. He wanted to see what Dr. Loomis saw in 1978. He wanted that experience. And for whatever other reason, he believed in some kind of cosmic tie between him and between Michael and Laurie. And so he was trying to facilitate that too. I don't know how you're connecting those dots to that's why Michael was able to escape and drive. Like, are you trying to say that Dr. Sartain let him out in 78 and Dr. Sartain was the one driving him around in 78? Because no, I don't think that's the case at all. So again, this puzzled me enough where it almost made me want to go rewatch the movie and like, did they fucking say that? And I just missed that for the last 6 years. So yeah, I don't agree at all with the Dr. Sartain twist being awesome. So that's why I included it as far as a hot take. The other side of it, I think there might be some misunderstanding there, either on your end or my end. And the comment section will let us know which. But nonetheless, guys, that's going to be it for this one. This was some wild stuff. There was a lot of takes, and thank you to everybody that submitted something. There were thousands of these, and so it was impossible for me to go through every single one of them, but I just grabbed some that really caught my attention. If you enjoyed this, let me know down below what other franchise you want to see me do some hot takes on next, and never be ashamed to share your hot takes. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all my 2024 new release reviews. I'm also going to put the video up here of just my general horror hot takes for you to check out, my personal hot takes. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.